You're listening to the Membership Geeks podcast, bringing you proven practical tips and advice from the leading experts on growing a successful membership business.
Well, hello there, membership. I'm Mike Morrison, your host for the show. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Membership Geeks podcast. This is the number one show for membership owners in the world, delivering proven practical tips and advice each and every week. If you are a brand new listener, first of all, welcome. I always love being able to reach more people in the membership world. I would ask you, I would advise you to hit that subscribe button in your podcast app to ensure that you do not miss a single episode. We're at 436 episodes now of the Membership Geeks podcast, and we're not slowing down. If you want to get the top tips and insights into what makes membership work right now, this podcast is the place to be. And you already know that if you're a long-term listener. I so appreciate you. I so value every second of time and attention that you give to this show. Thanks for your continued support. Thanks for all the reviews. If you haven't yet done so, it would mean so much if you could take just a minute or two to leave a nice review in whatever podcast app you listen to the show in. And ideally, that will come with a nice shiny 5 stars if I'm doing my job right. Not only will reviews let me know how we're doing on the show in terms of helping you, but also it helps us to reach more people in the membership world, which means we can make more of a difference, more of an impact, and we can help more people find success with the membership model. If you do leave a review, do hit me up on social media at Membership Geeks everywhere. Let me know so I can thank you personally. I do read each and every review, but they don't always show your name. I'm sure we got one a couple of months ago from something like Canadian Astronaut. So thank you, Canadian Astronaut. But if you do leave me a review, be sure to shout me out so I can thank you personally. I truly do value each and every review that we get. All right, so if you listened to last week's episode, you'll know that we're doing something a little bit special. It is the 10-year anniversary of Membership Academy coming up. And so we've got a nice little run of special episodes where we're moving away from the typical kind of top tips and interviews and stuff like that, and instead sharing a little bit more about the business, some of the things that we're doing in the future, but also some of the lessons and experiences that we've had over the past 10 years, a decade of running Membership Academy. Man, no wonder my hair's going grey, but I am so enjoying this little deviation, this little pulling open of the kimono, for want of a much better phrase. Last week, I shared some of the toughest things that I've had to do as a membership owner. And yeah, that got it got pretty real, right? It got pretty raw in terms of some of the struggles that we've had. Even considering the fact that I am the membership expert, that I've been doing this so long, I've accomplished so much with clients and with students inside Membership Academy, I still have those rough patches. I've still had to deal with a lot of struggles, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges. I think sometimes we feel that the experts that we see, that the voices we hear on our podcasts, the faces on our YouTube channels that we follow, that they've got everything figured out, they've got everything worked out, and that they're not going through some of the ups and downs and challenges that we are, right? But hopefully you're starting to see that that's not the case. Even the top experts in the membership space, of which I humbly consider myself one, we struggle. We go through a lot of rubbish, a lot of bad times. And I do hope that by sharing honestly about my journey, the journey of the company, the journey of the membership, that helps you see it and helps you navigate any struggles that you're going through as well. So today's episode, I want to share some insights, some lessons learned along the way through 10 years of running a successful membership. Now, this isn't going to be in the last 10 years, we've figured out the perfect funnel for your membership, because you know that doesn't exist, right? It's more that bigger picture kind of insight. It's more those experiences, those best practices, the fundamentals, as opposed to, well, we've learned, if you budget X amount on your Facebook ads, you'll get 2% extra return. Yeah, that's not what you're getting here. That's not what's going to help you in your business. I just want to share some of the big things that have stood out to me from the last 10 years. Some of it based on missteps that we made, because of course, while we started Membership Academy with a wealth of experience and success and results helping other memberships, it's a whole different ballgame when you're running a membership yourself, right? A fantastic chef doesn't always make the best restaurant owner. And so there's absolutely been a learning curve for myself over the last decade. And still to this day, probably the biggest mistake, the first insight really to share with you, the biggest mistake that we made when we started Membership Academy was overcompensating. I've suffered with imposter syndrome. I'm not ashamed to admit that or afraid to admit that. I feel like most entrepreneurs do at some stage in their career. And so I think that myself and my co-founder, when we started things off, there was this sense that we needed to over-deliver. We needed to explain too much. We almost needed to demonstrate that we knew what we were talking about. And so this really manifested itself in the courses and the workshops that we were putting out there in those first couple of years, where they would end up so long, so bloated, so waffly, because we felt we had to tell everybody everything that they could do. Right? So when we were talking about marketing a membership site, for example, we would try to cover literally everything you could do to market a membership site. I think on one hand, we kind of thought, okay, this is the way to go because, we want to make sure that we presented all the options. But honestly, being real with you, I think a big part of it was almost wanting to prove that we knew all the different ways you could market a membership. It was that imposter syndrome kicking in, which led to us overcompensating. But of course, what happens then is that you as a student, if you were a member of the Academy back in 2015, 2016, you weren't getting the concise, direct advice on what you should do. It is, I've learned and accepted and adapted to over the years, it is far better to tell people what they should do instead of trying to tell them everything that they could do. If you can record a 5-minute video that tells people that one thing that they should do and exactly how to do it, and you go deep into that, that is going to be far more useful than recording a course that's got 20 lessons and each lesson is 15 minutes of surface level stuff on different things that they could do, because they're not going to come out of that course or that workshop any better informed. They're not going to have the direction. And that becomes overwhelming because they might have gone into watching a course or gone into watching a workshop, looking for some tips, looking for a couple of things they can try, and you've just given them a whole bunch of new options that they didn't even realize about. So actually, you're doing the opposite of what you're meant to do. So that was a big, big lesson in designing learning materials, in redoing our courses. Moving away from this feeling like we had to cover every base, we had to show how smart we were, we had to prove our expertise by showing you just how much we knew, because, okay, great, pat on the back, fantastic, you know a lot. But how does that help you as a membership owner? How does that help you cut through the noise? How does it help you know exactly what you should do? And so, man, some of those early courses, I remember putting together a course on the member life cycle. That's something we teach to demonstrate that, you have key phases, you have acquisition, onboarding, engagement, retention, and reactivation. And to show that the member life cycle in an average membership is a continuous loop. Great concept, valid, we see it all the time. So I want to do like a 2-hour course on the member life cycle. That ended up being something like 12 or 13 hours. It was crazy because each stage, obviously you've got acquisition, that's marketing and sales, right? So everything you could possibly ever need to do to market or sell your membership, there was a lesson about it. But because we were trying to cram everything into a single course, that meant you had a 5-minute lesson on affiliates. You had a 5-minute lesson on social media. So you weren't going any deeper than a blog post or a podcast episode, and no one was being helped by that. And a 13-hour course to teach a surface level set of tactics and strategies. So yeah, that was a big shake-up for us when we realized just how far in the wrong direction we were going. It is so much better to tell people precisely what they should do and go deep on that rather than trying to tell them everything that they could do. And thankfully we learned that lesson pretty early on, and that's reflected now in the training that we have inside the academy. Newer courses, the workshops that we do, the masterclasses are all so decisively focused on these are just the things you should do. Forget everything else, just do these things and you will get what you need. You will make progress. So yeah, less is more. People are not joining your membership for the stuff. They don't want information, they want transformation, right? And so if you're designing courses and workshops, think about, is this something that they should do, or am I trying to just tell them all the things they could do just to avoid someone coming back and say, well, you didn't talk about ads, or you didn't talk about Pinterest. You're right, I didn't, because those are not the things for you to focus on. Have that confidence in yourself to empower you to give people a set direction, to give people the specifics. So that was a big thing for me. Probably still one of the biggest that I've carried over. Make sure you're just telling people what they should do. Something else as well, which was a big, probably a bit of an ego check for me early on, is recognizing that even though you're the expert, you're the face of it for most memberships. They're started by influencers, experts, solopreneurs, one-man bands, where you have a personal brand. And so a lot of people are joining because of you. They're joining for you. They resonate with your voice. They want you and your material. But despite all that, it really isn't all about you all of the time. It can't be. Not with a membership. Memberships thrive on the back of community, and that's going to become something that's increasingly important in future years too, as content becomes more commoditized thanks to AI and stuff like that. Memberships thrive on community, and that's always been the case. People come for content, they stay for community. But when you make your membership the you show, when the membership is the Mike Morrison show, that community can actually be damaged by that. And that was a big lesson for me early on, because I felt, and we did this within our Facebook group, and it worked in the Facebook group, but it then became detrimental in the paid membership. I felt that the best way to serve was to answer every question that was posted in the community as quickly as possible, as definitively as possible. So, we would over-deliver, surprise and delight by the fact that if you ask a question, oh wow, the head honcho, the top guy, the guru from up on high, he's taken time out of his day and he's replied. And not only that, he's replied to me really quickly. And, he's given me a big, long wall of text answer. Wow, that's more attention, that's more access, that's more responsiveness than people would expect from the expert in a community. And so that was definitely in my mind the way to stand out, the way to over-deliver, the way to blow our members away, by being so accessible, by being so fast to reply to every post. Now, of course, the first glaring problem with that is it's not scalable, right? Because once you get to hundreds and thousands of members, you can't do that for every member because you won't have time to do anything else. But the biggest problem it causes is it cuts everybody else out of the conversation. And this was something that I learned the hard way, because we had a membership that was just growing and thriving in terms of sales and signups. Feedback was incredible, but the community just never really clicked into place. And it was entirely by accident in realizing that if I stopped replying quickly, if I didn't rush to respond to every question, more conversation happened because I was stepping back and standing out of the way. Again, that happened accidentally, but think about it. What happens is if you go into a membership run by your favorite expert, you ask a question. What happens when that expert comes and replies to you? In your mind, the question is answered, the conversation's done. When you posted that question, you're kind of hoping you're going to get a reply from the head honcho, right? So you get that, and it is complete. Job done, fantastic. So you don't go back to that discussion and conversation. You consider the matter closed. You've got your answer. Great. You got the answer you want from the person you want it from. Job done. For other people in the community, they look at that conversation and they say, okay, well, Mike's chimed in now. Yeah, it's a pretty good answer. I guess probably no point in me contributing now. I did have some thoughts. I did have some experiences, but oh, well, the top guy's answered. My voice isn't needed. Now, that's not always the case. It's not always as cut and dry as that. But broadly speaking, that's what happens. By jumping in there and essentially ending the conversation by giving that sort of the not the final view, but certainly the authority, the expert in this space has spoken, that does close the conversation in a lot of ways. And so other people who might have had even more valuable contributions than you are discouraged from posting. They don't see there's no point. Okay, I'll not bother. And we saw that happening so much within our community to begin with. And it was only through doing what I now call strategically stalling that we were able to give the rest of the community the breathing room for them to talk to each other. And that's what needs to happen within a membership community. Your members need to talk to each other. They need to form connections with each other. Otherwise, it just becomes essentially one-to-one, but replicated, right? The dynamic, the connection and relationship in your community becomes one-to-one between you and each member. Just they all happen to be in the same space. You don't have a community. You just have a collection of people who are only there to hear your voice. So you've got to step back. You've got to get out the way. You've got to put that ego aside. And it's not always ego. You know, sometimes people do it out of ego. They don't like the idea that anyone else might have an opinion that they can share above their own. But a lot of the time, I think it's just misguided desire to be relentlessly helpful. And it's a bit like junk food, right? On a surface level, on an initial level, it satisfies that craving that someone has for an authoritative answer, for the expert to answer. But in the long run, it's not healthy for the community. And so that was a big insight that I always try and pass on to people. You need to step back. You need to give breathing room. You need to be a little bit more of a host than becoming the be-all, end-all for every point of conversation within your community. And so, that's definitely one of the biggest insights. Another thing that I try and preach and hammer home to people is just how critical feedback and data are in the growth of your membership. Everyone always wants to know what the secret sauce, the magic bullet to success is, and usually they think there's some sort of tactic, or they think there's a specific funnel, or they think there's a certain social media platform to publish on, and that's the magic bullet. And I always say there is no magic bullet. There's no one size fits all. There's no guarantees. But you know what? I'm wrong. There is a magic bullet. There are two magic bullets: feedback and data. Feedback from your members, your non-members, people who were members and now they're non-members. So people on a list who haven't joined your membership, the feedback you can get from them on why they've not joined is gold. People who do join your membership, the feedback you get about why they joined, what they're trying to achieve, how they're finding the experience, again, it is gold. And feedback from people who leave your membership. Why are they leaving? Are they likely to come back? What would have kept them? This is the magic bullet. Feedback and data. What do people tell you, and what does data tell you? Stats on website usage. Stats on logins. What are people actually doing on your site? What does the data show? What are your numbers? You need to know your numbers as a membership owner, the KPIs. You need to know average member tenure. You need to know churn rate. You need to know member lifetime value. You need usage information, but you need feedback. Membership owners don't ask for feedback enough. They don't do enough to get on top of their numbers. They don't use it enough. But if you are looking for a magic bullet, the magic bullet is not marketing strategies. It's not an ad strategy. It's not, wording in a social media caption. It's not a funnel. It's not closing your doors and opening it. There is no magic bullet in marketing, but the magic bullets for membership and for all business, feedback and data. You'll never go wrong with those two things. They are the most powerful things you can have. Ask for it and use it, because without it, you're just guessing. And most membership owners are just guessing. Now, of course, in the early days, there's a lot of guesswork involved, right? We do recommend that when you're planning your membership, when you are validating and researching your ideas, you're going to be asking for feedback, you're going to be asking for input, but that's not quite the same as feedback from people who are actually users, right? So there's a lot of guesswork at the beginning because there has to be, but once you've got that user base, those members are your most valuable source of direction. They will steer you in the right direction, but you need to ask, because guesswork won't work. You simply can't predict what's going to resonate with members. Like even in terms of adding new features or new content to your membership site, you just can't predict what's actually going to hit the spot. I still remember, really early on in the journey, within the first couple of years, having this slate of new features and changes and content that we were going to add to the Academy. And there were a couple of things on that list that were just kind of like, oh, we might as well do that because that's a quick, easy thing for us to do. Probably no one will care about it, but we'll stick it in there because it only takes an hour or two and, it's a little extra value. And maybe, I was almost said predictably, unpredictably, the stuff we thought people were going to love, nobody was really that bothered about it. The stuff that we threw in there as a bit of an afterthought, they loved it. Like they went nuts for it. They asked for more. They consumed it. They used it and we couldn't have predicted that. We didn't have the feedback. We didn't have the data to inform the decision. So we were just guessing. We were looking at what we knew had worked for other people. We were looking at what we would like. Okay, so as a membership owner, what kind of stuff would I like? But you can't predict what's going to resonate with members in terms of features. And you need feedback and data. You need that double header, because quite often what someone says and what someone does is worlds apart. Preference and behavior, usually they don't always line up. So you need both sides. You need the data on what people are doing. You need the feedback on what they say they like and how they're using it and all of that to give you that full picture. But honestly, if you're looking for a magic bullet, that is where it's at: feedback and data. Something else, again, just kind of, I think, getting into some just little bits and pieces I've noted down here. I think we always worry about communicating too much, about sending out too many emails, about sending out too many prompts. Members want to be nudged. They want to be prodded. They want to be reminded to log in, to use the membership. They want to be told, well, hey, you started this course and we can see you've not actually done anything for a couple of weeks. Here's the link to the next lesson to keep you on track. Members want to be reminded of this stuff. So if you're ever kind of thinking, I don't want to send out another email, another reminder, lean towards sending a little bit more than you're comfortable with, because some members do need it. They do need multiple reminders. They do need telling 3 times that week about a live call that's happening. Same goes for sales emails as well. Your audience can tolerate and appreciate more email, more nudges, more reminders about a campaign, a special offer, a feature than you think they will do, than you might be comfortable with. People need to be nudged, they need to be prodded, they need to be reminded, both from a marketing point of view, but also for members, for member engagement, to tell them about live calls, to keep them on track with courses or material that they've started but not finished, to encourage them to dive into your community. Like, one of the favorite things that our members respond to is our weekly email newsletter. And if we don't send it, or we send it a little bit later in the day, like, we'll get emails asking if everything's okay. I remember the first time we went over to the States and we were on the West Coast, so there was an 8-hour delay. So normally we'd send the member newsletter around 11 a.m. UK time. We were over in the States, we sent at 11 a.m. Pacific, which is 7 p.m. UK time, and we had a whole bunch of emails checking in on us. Members want to be communicated with. They want to be told. They want to be nudged and prodded. So don't be a stranger. Yeah. Almost conversely to that, on the flip side of that, sort of, people don't pay as much attention or care as much as you do about certain specifics, about certain aspects of your membership. I think sometimes we panic that if we don't do things a certain way, or, you know, if we usually do a live call on a Wednesday, but 1 week because of personal circumstances, we need to move it to a Thursday. I think we tend to overthink little things like that, stuff on that level. And we think, oh, heck, if we do that, if we change the time of this, if we have to miss a call because we're on holiday, if we don't publish something this week and we give them 2 things next week instead, people are going to hate it. People are going to rage. They're going to riot. They're going to leave the membership. People don't care. People don't pay as much attention or care as much as you do. I think I learned that lesson the first Christmas. Not the first Christmas of the Academy, because it had been going for like 4 months and it wasn't all encompassing at that point. But I think at the end of 2016, when the membership became the entirety of our business, and, you know, we were over the 1,000 member mark and it was thriving, it was active, we were worried. We were worried about taking that Christmas off. There was no plan to completely detach from it. You know, still going to be checking in on the forum, but, you know, we wouldn't be doing live calls for a couple of weeks. Weren't going to be living on the forum 24/7. Customer service things were going to take a bit longer. And of course, we were not even opening the laptop on Christmas Day or Boxing Day. And we panicked. Like, God, we put in place so many safeguards, so many fallbacks. We wrote out like a series of emails and forum posts to prepare people. Honestly, you would think that we were preparing for the end of the world. This was all for taking, I think it was maybe a week off over Christmas. And you know what? Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. Nobody batted an eyelid. There was no kickback. There was no pushback. There was no negativity. Just have a great Christmas. And that was it. And I think it was a weird one, because that also kind of hits the ego a little bit, because you're like, well, you should miss me. You should be upset that I'm not, you know, going to be there 24/7. But you've got to remember, your members do not live your membership in the way that you do. Now, that's not a reason to get lazy or complacent. I'm not saying this to kind of say to you, listen, nobody cares about your membership, so just phone it in. But if you find yourself worrying about minor things, if you find yourself panicking because you really need to cancel a live call this week, or you want to take the summer off and you want things to be a little quieter, and so maybe you're going to scale back on a few things, and you are freaking out, you are panicking, honestly, people do not pay as much attention. People do not care as much as you do. They will never care as much about your membership as you do. And people who would throw a hissy fit and leave your membership because you decided to do a live call in the evening instead of the morning because you had an appointment, you don't want those people as members, because they'll never be happy. And you've got to have boundaries. You've got to have flexibility. You've got to have the ability to switch things up. A membership needs to fit around your life. And yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind. People just don't pay as much attention. They don't live or die on your membership as much as you do. And when we're speaking about boundaries, probably my biggest lesson in all of business is the power of the word no. No is a superpower. Your time, your mental stability, your mental health, your happiness, these are business assets. Protect your time and your boundaries as though they were your most important business assets. Because every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to other things. You do tend to find, again, in business, in life, people can find themselves becoming a little bit people-pleasing, right? They don't want to say no. They don't want to turn down someone when they say, you know, I really would just like to have to just jump on a Zoom call with you. I love the membership, but honestly, what I really need is to jump on a Zoom call. And then you do that, and that's an hour of basically free coaching you've just given somebody, and it doesn't make any difference, right? They still leave, or, you know, they message you next month and say, I'm still struggling. Could we hop on Zoom again? Like, you need to protect your time. You need to protect your boundaries. You cannot say yes to everything. And anytime you find yourself kind of trying to justify, oh, I shouldn't do this, but okay, it'll only take me 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes add up, but also you are saying no to other things. If you're worried about saying no to one request, to one appointment, to one person, because you don't want to say no, just think about what else you're saying no to, because you do not have infinite time. You cannot do everything. And so if you decide to give up an hour to grab a coffee with somebody that you feel bad about turning down, what have you said no to during that hour? What else could you have been doing? No is a superpower. Saying no to opportunities that just don't align. Saying no to member requests that actually go beyond the realms of reasonable expectation of what somebody should be getting for $20 a month. Saying no to those people who just want to have a quick catch up, just want to pop on Zoom. Hey, shall we just grab a coffee? Where actually you know you don't want to, you just don't want to be that person who turns them down. You need to learn to say no. No is a freaking superpower, especially for a membership where you are looking at hundreds of thousands of people who would very gladly take up your time. If they knew they would get a yes, they will take whatever they can get from you, because they respect your voice. They want to learn from you. They want to, be in your radar, right? Within your space. And so when you're running a membership, which is a scale membership, it's a volume-based business, the importance of saying no is magnified. Learn to say no. It is a freaking superpower. Next time your gut wants to say no, but your head makes you say yes because you just don't have the confidence to say no. You feel bad. What harm could it do? Say no. Just take a moment to think, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? I'm saying no to having an hour apiece to myself. I'm saying no to being focused for the rest of the day because I know that this is going to throw me off my rhythm. I'm saying no to doing some work on membership content that actually will help hundreds of people, not just this one person who wants me on a Zoom call. Learn to say no. It is a superpower. When we're talking about member happiness, what people are happy with and all that sort of stuff, remember, not every member needs to be active. Not every member needs to be someone who pops up in the community, who you hear from every day, in order to be happy. I think sometimes we worry so much about increasing engagement because we think that engagement and noise are the same thing. We think that if someone's not posting in your community, they're not engaged. Some people engage in silence. I realized I'm one of those people. Again, this is something I worried about early on until I thought deeply about how I behave as a member in other memberships I'm part of. There's this rule of thumb, the 99-1 rule, which loosely states that only around 1% of participants in any community will be power users. There will be people who will start conversations. There'll be people who check in multiple times a day. There'll be people who go to every call, who buy every bit of merch. They are power users. They're awesome. Then another 9% will just be kind of regular active users, people who maybe check in once or twice a week rather than once or twice a day. They don't necessarily start conversations, but they join in. They'll show up on calls. You'll kind of know who they are. But then the remaining 90%, you'll either never hear from or you barely hear from. And that is often the case in a lot of communities. You have a substantial part of your member base who you will never see in your community. Or maybe they'll post once and then they disappear. They post and you think, oh, is this a new member? Oh no, they've been a member for 2 years. Huh, strange. And then you'll not hear from them again. People engage in different ways. And when I thought about the way in which I engage in memberships I'm part of, there are some memberships that I will access their community multiple times a day, but I will not reply. I will not post, not deliberately, but I'll go in, I'll catch up, I'll learn a thing or two, I'll get a little insight. And if I've got nothing to say, I won't kind of force myself to say anything. So there are memberships where I've never posted in their community, but I've been members for years. But I will consume content. I will check in on the community. I've been on live calls and not really said anything. Not out of shyness. I'm not a shy person. Not out of trying to stay hidden. That's just the way that I engage in a lot of memberships I'm a part of. And even in kind of like hobby-based stuff. So for my sins, I'm a fan of Manchester United Football Club, unfortunately. And I'm part of an online community of fans. And I've had an account on that forum since, I think, 2011. And I'm still classed as a new member because I've made less than 15 posts. And I've been in there for over a decade. I've been in that community longer than I've been in my own community. Not hearing from people, not seeing people in your community doesn't mean they're not happy, doesn't mean they're not active. And even if they're not lurkers like I am, some people will be part of your membership and be happy paying just because they like to know that it is there when they need it. I still remember one member who was somebody who I knew before we started the academy. We did some work with her as a client. She was part of networks that we were part of in the early days, other memberships. And like we'd met her a few times. I'd been at masterminds with her a few times. We'd spoken on stages at the same events. She was one of our early members, but was rarely ever in the community. Rarely ever even logged in. And, you know, we got to talking and she was just gushing about how valuable the membership was. And I was kind of thinking, oh, I don't get this. So I just outright asked, I was like, listen, I've got to say, we pay close attention to what people do. You're never in there. You never log in. What's making this valuable? And she said two things. One, the peace of mind that she gets from knowing that if she has a problem, that our membership is there. And the other thing was the fact that that was proven with one time where she'd logged in, posted a question, got an answer, and in her mind, and what she said, that answer paid for the membership, paid for her subscription fees, because it enabled her to make a change, make a decision that saved her thousands. And that, just that tiny little piece of value made the difference. So yeah, that shifted my perception on needing everybody to be active, everyone to be consuming. Now, of course, it doesn't mean you take it for granted. You still want to be getting feedback. You still want to be following up with people if they're inactive, especially if they were really active once and they started dropping off. But don't assume that just because you don't hear from someone, they're not happy. People extract value in so many different ways. Again, people are there for transformation, not information. And if they can accomplish something significant in just 5 minutes of logging into your membership site and never log in again the rest of that year, but that 5 minutes moves the needle for them in a way that is seriously groundbreaking, then they're going to be happy. So yeah, again, in terms of insights, in terms of perspective changes for me, that was a big thing. Another thing that I've absolutely come to learn, again, it's in business in general, not just memberships, but it's that whole thing of best laid plans, right? What's that saying? God laughs when man makes a plan, or something along those lines. Definitely had that proven time and time again over the years. I talked a bit more about this in last week's episode, but, you know, the whole thing around, we had big plans towards the end of 2019, coming off the back of our first ever conference, Retain Live. We're doing our second version of that conference coming up in September, but it was planned that we would do a follow-up event either the year after or in 2021, and then COVID hit. We had so many plans for the membership, but then COVID hit. We were working on software, but then we had to put that on the back burner to focus on the membership when COVID happened. So all these plans, like the scale of the plans that we had, and then COVID hit. Other things that we'd plotted out before COVID. So this isn't just about COVID. Other stuff that we plotted out, and then something unexpected happens and everything goes out the window. The plans that I'd made, so I talked again in last week's episode about when my co-founder, Callie Willows, left the company. This actually came, the email about it came the day after I'd spent 2 or 3 days essentially plotting out exactly what was going to happen for the next year and where the business is going to be in a few years' time and all that sort of stuff. And then, boom, that email came like a bomb and just blew everything up, and everything changed. So, yes, I don't know if it's an insight or just a general existential gripe, but be prepared for your best laid plans to get totally blown out of the water. Don't get too married to your plans. Don't get too attached to them. Don't freak out if the you-know-what hits the fan. Have backups, have contingency. It's a lot easier to do that when you've got a membership business because, of course, if something you had planned doesn't pan out or doesn't work out the way you want, you've always got that base of your membership, the recurring revenue. So you've always got that runway to walk back on if things aren't locking in, if plans have to change at short notice. But yeah, that's just the world weary. Not even a realization, because it's kind of always been a thing. We all kind of know that, right? But yes, I've seen evidence multiple times that best laid plans, even for the experts in the membership space, don't always pay off. Something else I really, really do want to reiterate to people, and this is reinforced through a lot of experience: keep things super simple. This is something I try and hammer into our students just relentlessly in the early days. I see so many people come in with the most convoluted, overly complex plans for their membership. They are planning a launch with 3 different tiers, and one tier is only going to be open certain times a year. Another tier is going to be application only. The introductory tier will be X amount of dollars for the first 3 months, and then it'll go up to a certain amount, and then it'll change. And it's just like, stop. People overthink, people overcomplicate stuff. I've been guilty of that in the past. But what keeps getting proven time and time again for me is that simplicity scales, complex fails. I like that saying. I like that little truism. Simplicity scales, complex fails. Because the more complicated you make things, the harder it's going to be to navigate change in the future. It's a little bit like an oil tanker. Right? If you start out with a tiny little one-man boat, and then you just add and you add and you add and you introduce over complex systems and you over encumber yourself and you build and you build and you build, suddenly you've got this unwieldy, unmovable behemoth. And if you need to adapt or adjust, it takes forever to change course. You ever seen a big tanker trying to shift course? Stay nimble, stay unencumbered, stay nice and simple. People try to sprint before they can even crawl. And as a result, they fall on their butt. Complexity usually crashes to the ground. Keep things super simple. Prove that you can get a basic funnel working well before you start funnel hacking businesses that have been around 20 years and adding in all of these bells and whistles into a funnel. Just prove that you can get the bare bones basic funnel. Someone opts in for an email, you send them some follow-up sales messages, you get them to buy. Prove you can do that before you buy the expensive funnel software that, has 50 different potential routes to sales and calls to actions, all sorts of upsells, downsells, cross-sells, nonsense. Prove you can do the simple well. Prove you can sell one membership before you add in back-end products. Prove that you can get people to join on one tier before you add in 4 different tiers with different pricing models. Keep it super simple. Simplicity scales, complex fails each and every time, because the more complex something is, the harder it is to explain to people, the harder it is to market, the more decision fatigue sets in for customers who are looking to buy. Everything that we've done well, everything that's worked for us, everything that is fundamental to what's been successful has been rooted in simplicity. My most successful clients have kept things super simple. One offer, done extremely well. Simplicity scales, complex fails. And the final point, I think a really good point and insight to finish on. None of this is ever going to be perfect. And that's okay. Perfection is a myth. Perfection's a fairy tale. It's a unicorn. Because what is perfect today will probably be imperfect in a year's time. What's perfect to you will not be perfect to somebody else. What's perfect for memberships in one industry will be the worst thing possible for memberships in a different industry. Perfection is an absolute myth because perfection is subjective, right? Perfection's personal. It's fluid, it changes. It's never going to be perfect, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Some of the most successful products and businesses in the world are far from perfect, and they're always changing. Memberships are an evolution. If you are gathering feedback, if you are gathering data, if you've got your eye on the ball, if you're staying on top of things, everything's going to change. People change, industries change, technology changes, trends change. We're seeing that right now. You might have had the perfect content-heavy membership. Now AI has entered the room. Is your membership still as perfect as it ever was? Perfection is unachievable because it just doesn't exist. Don't get it perfect, just get it going. That's that famous quote from, I believe, Stephen Carney from Traits of Successful People. Don't get it perfect, just get it going. This is so pertinent, so relevant to memberships. Memberships are always changing, always evolving. And so you're never going to achieve perfection. And that is okay. Nobody's expecting perfect. And even if they were, each individual person in your membership will have a different perception of what their perfect member experience would look like. And you cannot cater to every other person's version of perfection. You can't even chase your own because it's going to change depending on your mood, depending on the day, depending on, whether you've seen somebody else doing something that you hadn't thought of. And then all of a sudden, oh man, I want to be doing that too. My perfect membership is no longer perfect because it's not doing this other thing that I think is cool. Don't get stuck in that trap of chasing perfect. Embrace the freedom that comes from imperfection, from recognizing that memberships are always evolving. They're always going to change. That is so freeing because it means you don't have to get it perfect now, because that perfection couldn't possibly last even if you could accomplish it. Membership's been an evolving product. Gives you so much freedom to test, so much freedom to stagger how you roll things out, to adapt, to improve, to listen to feedback, to refine. Embracing that evolution, accepting that you can't ever accomplish perfection is absolutely freeing. And so if you're at the start of your journey and you have been hesitating, you've been holding back on launching, or maybe just not even pursuing your idea because you're waiting for the circumstances to be perfect. Hey, circumstances, you might reach that day where everything lines up and everything's perfect, ready for you to finally unveil a membership to the world or add a new feature. And then tomorrow we might get a report case of COVID, right? Talking about those best laid plans. Don't chase perfection. Progress will always be better than perfection. And that is where I'm going to end things. I hope that you've gained something from today's episode. I was really reticent about recording this one because I was a little bit worried, when I'm saying it's 10 years of membership insight, that people are going to be wanting tactical, right? That they're going to be wanting, okay, so is it better to send a welcome video than it is to send a welcome email? And is that better to send on day 15 than day 10? But honestly, these sort of granular, these little tactics, I mentioned people searching for those magic bullet. Like, these things don't matter anywhere near as much as the stuff that I've talked about today. Really, really learning the lessons from what I've shared from my 10 years, that is going to help other stuff that you do, help the specific things, the tactics that you implement, the directions you take. That will help you to better navigate, to make better decisions around that. It's this kind of stuff that moves the needle for you and for your business. And so I do hope that you've gained something from it. I'd love to hear back from you about your insights from however many years you've been running your membership. Hit me up on social media at Membership Geeks everywhere, or if you are inside Membership Academy, then pop a note in the community. We'll keep that conversation going. What have been your insights from your time running your membership? I'd love to hear if anything I've shared today resonated with you. I'd love to hear if you disagree with anything. You might think, you know what? No, complexity is champion. Complexity is key. Simple sucks. I'd love to hear from you. Follow up, let me know, let's keep the conversation going. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap up today's episode of the Membership Geeks podcast. I do hope you found it useful and insightful. I'll be back again very soon with another installment of the Membership Geeks podcast. Bye for now. If you enjoyed this week's episode of the Membership Geeks podcast, we invite you to check out membershipacademy.com. Membership Academy is the original membership about memberships, and it's the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a successful online membership business. Whether you're still trying to figure out what your idea is going to be and you need some help making it a reality, or whether your website is already up and running and you're looking for ways to grow and attract new members, then Membership Academy can help you to get to the next level. Not only do you get access to our step-by-step membership roadmap, our extensive training library, and exclusive member-only discount and tools, you'll also become part of our supportive, active community of membership owners that will help you along the way in your journey with feedback, encouragement, and advice. All of this and more make Membership Academy the #1 place to be for anyone looking to start, manage, and grow a successful membership business. Check it out and join the community at membershipacademy.com.